Okay, so let's start now. Let's continue the chapter genetics, and in this part we'll study genes and their alleles. Okay, genes and their alleles. So normally every gene has two alternative form of for a character, producing different effects. Okay, every character have two alternative form. For example, if we consider height, it can be either tall or short. So we use dwarf in place of short. The alternative form of a gene is called allele. So this is the definition. The alternative form. There are two forms of a gene. So that alternative form, if there is tall and dwarf are the alleles. Okay. Example in the character of tongue rolling, either one can roll the tongue or one cannot. Thus, two alleles for the genes are rolling and not rolling. The two alleles for this gene, which is tongue rolling, is the gene. The two alleles are rolling and non-rolling. Okay, here you can see the alleles for eye color, then blood type, whether it is A, B, AB, or O, hair color, whether it is black or brown, growth, whether it's tall or dwarf. Here you can see tongue rolling. Once this side is not rolling, this is non-rolling, this is rolling. Okay, so these are the genes and the alleles. Now, based on the two forms of character, one character is usually called as dominant, the other one is called as recessive. So, if you generally see in a class, if you see in your among your friends, how many can roll a tongue? If you ask 10 students to roll a tongue, out of 10, at least 5 to 7 will roll their tongue, and 3 might not roll the tongue. So, how many cannot roll the tongue? It will be around, if you take 10 students, 3 or less than 3, but most of them can roll the tongue. So there are two alleles. One is dominant and other is recessive. So there is a pair of a gene on a particular chromosome for tongue rolling. Okay? There is a pair of a gene on a particular chromosome for tongue rolling. So in some cases, this gene is active. In some cases, the gene is not active. If the gene is active, then the person can roll the tongue. If it is not active, the person cannot roll the tongue. Okay? A large number can roll a tongue. So that's why this is called as dominant. Rolling tongue will be a dominant character because more people can roll the tongue. Very less cannot roll the tongue. So it is called as recessive. Usually dominant gene, we represent it with capital letter. Okay, dominant gene. We will represent it with capital and recessive with small letter. For example, if I take rolling tongue, I will take capital R for rolling tongue, and non-roller I will take small r. Here you can see dominant and recessive trait. A dominant trait is the trait that appears when two different alleles are inherited on the same trait. Okay? A dominant trait. If there are two different alleles are inherited for the same trait, you can see a dominant trait. Okay? For example, T for tall and T for short. Here you can clearly see capital T and small t. A recessive trait is a trait that seems to disappear when two different alleles are inherited. So recessive trait cannot express itself when you have dominant trait with you. See, there is dominant allele, dominant gene and recessive gene. T dominant, small t recessive. But dominant will be expressed. It will be tall. The plant will be tall. Whereas if you have two yellow and green seed, the seeds will be yellow if there is one capital Y which represent dominant. So recessive is not here because recessive cannot express in presence of dominant gene. Recessive cannot express in presence of dominant gene. And here again the definition of alleles. Alternative form of a gene occupying the same position on the homologous chromosome and affecting the same characteristics but in different way. So it is alternative form of a gene. There is allele 1, allele 2, and same place on the homologous chromosome, but their effect is different. One, for example, if you consider height, the characteristics as height, one will say it is tall, the other one will be dwarf. So dominant allele and recessive allele. The kind of allele which expresses itself regardless of the presence of another allele or alleles for a given gene. The allele which can express is called dominant. It can express any time, okay, whether there is presence or absence of any other allele, but this allele will express itself. The dominant allele for height in pea plant is tall. Okay. Now, recessive allele is a kind of allele whose expressing is suppressed, which cannot be expressed in presence of a dominant allele or a given gene. So there is a recessive allele. This will not express itself if there is a presence of dominant. So when it will express, only it will express if both the alleles are recessive. When can a recessive allele express? Only when both the presence of recessive allele. A recessive allele can express only itself in presence of another recessive allele. Example, the recessive allele for height in garden pea is what? Here is a garden pea plant. I have shown three. This is different heights. So if you take around 100 seeds of garden pea plant, and if you try to grow a plant, maximum number of the plants will have tall height. Okay, because it is the dominant character. If you take 100 seeds of garden pea plant and make and grow a plant from that, most of the plants will show you tall characteristics. Okay? This is just by statistic. Next is genotype and phenotype. So how can you arrange these two letters in pair, R and R? There are many letters. There are three R, capital R, three small r. Okay? How you can arrange? Capital R, we can arrange one. Capital R, we can arrange small r. Is there any other way? No. So R and R for rolling and non-rolling. Capital R, as I've already told, it is dominant and it is for rolling. Small r is for non-rolling. So these are the three ways in which we can represent this RR, R small, capital R small r, and small r small r. So when both the capital R, it is called as dominant. When one capital, one R, it is one dominant and one capital, one recessive. And both are recessive when this both are small. Sorry. Yeah. And both are when both are recessive, smaller. Okay. So what will be the expressed character in case of tongue rolling? If it is capital R, it is called as homozygous dominant. Homo means same and dominant because it is capital R. So if dominant, you have to know that it will be expressed anyway, anyhow, anywhere. Even if one dominant character is there, it will be expressed. So here in this case, it will be a tongue roller. One capital, one smaller, heterozygous dominant. Now, as I said, dominant is expressed anytime, anywhere, anyhow. It doesn't matter what is present. Other. Now here there is one dominant and one recessive. One capital R, one recessive. But the character will be dominant. Which is the dominant character? Tongue roller. And when both are recessive, that time it will be non-roller. Okay. So how many types of genetic constitution letter combination are there in case of roller and non-roller? In case of roller, tongue roller, there are two combinations. One is capital R, one is capital R, small r. In case of non-roller, there is only one combination, smaller. Okay. So roller, there are two roller. Now genotype and phenotype. The genetic constitution or type of gene possessed are called genotype. The genetic constitution, or what is genetic makeup of the body, is the genotype. The express shown character is called phenotype. I've already told that gene expresses a character. Now this character is visible. Now tall and dwarf. Tall is visible, dwarf is also visible. The visible character is called as phenotype. Here you can see genotype versus phenotype. The genotype is the organism genetic information. Phenotype is set of observable physical trait. Now homozygous dominant heterozygous and homozygous recessive.